Hey there, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Total Ramblings. And as I sit here in my Doctor Who scarf and my Star Wars themed t-shirt, facts that will become very relevant in just a moment, I'm here to talk about the latest episode of Doctor Who. Obviously, there are going to be some massive spoilers here because I'm going to be giving you a detailed synopsis and my thoughts of the episode. I've literally just finished watching it. These are immediate off-the-cuff reactions. I haven't had time to think about it. I've just made a bunch of notes on my phone whilst I was watching it, and literally this is my hot take. So, this episode is called Lux, and I have to say, I think I've just watched the most meta episode of Doctor Who ever, and possibly the most meta episode of any science fiction or TV show ever. Interesting, right? So here we go. Like I say, there will be some spoilers. If you haven't seen this episode yet, or if you don't want to be spoiled, watch this later. At the time I'm recording this, it's about 5 minutes to 10 in the morning. It is Saturday, the 19th of April 2025. I've just watched it on iPlayer. This episode is called Lux. We start off in a cinema. As it turns out, we're in Miami in 1952, although we don't find that out until a little bit later. But we start off with a bunch of people in a cinema watching a newsreel about an atom bomb test. And the projectionist puts on a cartoon, a Mr. Ringading cartoon. So we're kind of talking like sort of Looney Tunes, you know, kind of Merry Melodies type sort of thing, where Mr. Ringading sings a song. And then through an extremely unlikely chain of events, the projectionist, whose name we later learn is Mr. Pie, he leaves a spoon on the side of on his table in his projection room, and moonlight comes through, bounces off the spoon, bounces all around the room into various things, and goes into the light of the projector. And Mr. Ringading comes out of the cinema screen after interacting with the people watching, with the audience, and says, "We're going 3D." And bang, we go into our opening credits. So we are now on board the TARDIS. The Doctor and Belinda are trying to get to May 24th, 2025, which is a Saturday. So I'm kind of getting a throwback here to when Amy Pond was, I think she was trying to get back to her wedding day, which was a Saturday, and where an episode of Doctor Who was due to be shown. So we've kind of got a bit of a replay of some previous ideas here. Belinda suggests that the Gallifrey, which she doesn't know the name of, the Doctor's home planet is planet Time Lordia. And the Doctor says, "Oh, that would be brilliant," but it's not. And he makes what he calls a vortex indicator. They can't get back to this particular date, May 24th, and he creates a device that will kind of lasso the TARDIS to that particular date. It wasn't really played this way, but I couldn't help but thinking, but this vortex indicator, which the Doctor likes to call the Vindicator, looks a lot like a guitar. It's got a strap, it's got a triangular sort of end with a thing that, and I'm thinking, are we going to see this as a guitar in the future? I don't know. Anyway, they get dressed up, they go to the TARDIS wardrobe room. We don't see the wardrobe room, but we do see them go in at one level of the TARDIS console room and come out at another. And I have to say, I do absolutely love this TARDIS console room. Some people have said it's too big, it's too bright, it's too overblown. Nah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's exactly what a console room should be. The TARDIS is infinite in size. It could be the size of a planet, a baseball field, whatever, you know. Anyway, and we get a slightly heavy-handed reference to segregation now. The Doctor looks at his own hand and says, I'm all dressed up with no one to see, and that might be wise because it's nighttime, there's not many people around. And of course they're in 1952 America, where some areas are segregated. There's a strange reference to Rock Hudson, so they've arrived outside the cinema, right? Obviously the TARDIS taking them where they need to be, right? And Rock Hudson's in a film, and Belinda said that he was referenced in their HIV training course. So, you know, is this Russell T Davies kind of... Some people would say, oh, it's another agenda, it's a gay agenda, referencing HIV, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I'm not quite sure why the reference was there. It doesn't matter. I just... perhaps slightly heavy-handed, but I don't know. Anyway, the cinema's all chained up. And of course, the Doctor can't abide a mystery. And so we have our first reference to Scooby-Doo here, where the Doctor says, I'm Velma. Anyway, turns out the 15 people who were watching when Mr. Ringading came to life by climbing out of the cinema screen, they've gone missing. So they go to a diner. I am not convinced by the accent of the guy working at the diner. I'm not American, can you tell? But I thought his accent was a bit dodgy, if I'm honest with you. If there's any Americans watching, perhaps they could let me know. Anyway, they meet a lady called Mrs. Lowenstein, whose son Tommy was one of the 15 that were in that cinema when it all happened. And but they can hear films playing during the night. The projectionist, Mr. Pye, is still in the cinema and runs the films every night. He was basically suspected of murder, but they were never able to find any bodies. So basically the Doctor and Belinda break into the cinema, and quite a funny scene when they hear noises around the cinema, and Belinda says, is somebody tap dancing at us? Anyway, Mr. Ringading appears, and he is a cartoon. He's a two-dimensional cartoon, about 2 feet high, so they say. And he is allegedly light come to life. He is the god of light. He is one of the pantheon gods. So we've met a few of these pantheon gods over the last series of Doctor Who, because essentially the walls of reality have been kind of disrupted and they've broken through into our universe. Anyway, Mr. Pye is able to distract Mr. Ringading by putting on one of his cartoons. And it turns out, because he's a cartoon, when the cartoon of Mr. Ringading is projected and he sings his Mr. Ringading song, he can't help but sing. I thought that might come into play later on, but it didn't. It's just kind of like a distraction. And essentially, Mr. Pye is kind of subject to Mr. Ringading's whims, because Mr. Ringading has kind of brought Mr. Pye's dead wife back to life using old films. And so, you know, he's kind of been captured, if you like, by Mr. Ringading, and he's kind of his slave because through him, he's managed to get his wife. Anyway, where are we? Yeah, so anyway, the Doctor and Belinda end up being trapped by our antagonist within a film themselves and become cartoons. So now we have more references to Scooby-Doo. We've got the weird cartoon music in the background as we see the cartoon versions of the Doctor and Belinda, and the dialogue is deliberately over the top, but this was probably my least favourite part of the episode. And the Doctor very, very, very quickly realises that by becoming sad, they can gain some kind of extra dimension. Bit weird. So the Doctor forces himself to talk about Gallifrey and gradually becomes more 3D. not overly convinced by this, but hey, you know, we're talking about a TV show where cartoons come to life. So who am I to criticise? I don't know. I just thought sorry, it's picking up this cable here. It wasn't my favourite part of the episode. And kind of by this point, I was starting to think, this is drifting a bit, this episode now. We're kind of doing stuff kind of like for, what's the word I'm looking for? Not shock value, but just to kind of, we're just kind of doing wacky stuff just because we can. But then we get to the extremely mega meta moment. The Doctor and Belinda try and break out of the film, and they start by kind of trying to, you know, move the film along and jump from frame to frame, and that doesn't work. And then the Doctor literally breaks the fourth wall, and the Doctor and Belinda are looking at us, the audience, pressing on our TV screen, and they break through the screen and they come out of a TV very much like the TV I was watching this on, and they're in a living room, and they're with 3 Doctor Who fans. One's wearing a scarf, and I went and got my scarf especially. It lives just by my front door. I went and got this scarf. I have many scarves, but this is one of them. And one's wearing a Star Wars themed t-shirt with Grogu. As it happens, I'm sitting here watching a Doctor Who with a Star Wars themed TV, and I'm like, oh my God, they've put Doctor Who fans into Doctor Who. Now, this has happened before. The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, Sylvester McCoy era, featured a character who was known to be an allegory for Doctor Who fans. We've actually had Doctor Who fans in Doctor Who. And, you know, they're telling the Doctor what their favourite episode is. The Doctor's like, what? So I'm just a character on a TV show? And they're like, yeah. And they're saying, he's like, what's your favourite episode? And they all say blink, 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 blink. And he's like, not the one with the goblins, not the one. And, you know, obviously these aren't this Doctor's episodes, right? And so we've got this very surreal conversation where the Doctor is talking about Doctor Who with Doctor Who fans, right? Anyway, we then get a not so subtle dig at Doctor Who fandom, because one of the fans, she says, oh yeah, I knew this was going to happen because this was leaked online. Hashtag RIP Doctor Who. And so this is like a not so subtle dig at Doctor Who fans. Doctor Who fans, if you didn't know, you probably do know because you're watching this, but every time something remotely different or weird happens, people declare the death of Doctor Who, RIP Doctor Who. I'll be honest with you, I don't tend to discuss Doctor Who with many people, and I like to kind of, and it's partly because of this, you know, you get these weird takes on Doctor Who. Anyway, everyone kind of comes to the conclusion that the fans are so annoying, but then the fans reveal that in fact this is all completely made up. The Doctor is not fictional, and they are just part of the trap. And one of them says, you're 30 minutes in, it's time for the third act, and they're forcing the Doctor to go back, which I thought was funny. I actually laughed out loud at that point. You're 30 minutes in, time for the third act. But here's the thing. They're stood there talking by a TV, and you can see BBC, Doctor Who, the Doctor Who Diamond logo on the TV in a Doctor Who episode as part of the episode. Mind blown, right? Is this the first time we've actually seen the Doctor Who logo in a Doctor Who episode? We've seen elements of the Doctor Who title sequences before. So, for example, in the first episode of An Unearthly Child, the very first episode of Doctor Who, I believe when the TARDIS first leaves Earth, we kind of go to a merge of like the sort of the kind of opening sort of rocket spiral effect that you see in the opening titles of Doctor Who. When the Doctor is being interrogated in Day of the Daleks, the original version, I believe you see like elements of the opening Doctor Who title sequence. But now we've seen the Doctor Who logo as part of Doctor Who in a Doctor Who episode. Wow. Anyway, the Doctor decides the only way to escape is to stop the film. He burns his hand and it manages to heal his burn with the remains of some bi-generation energy. And this is where Lux says, hang on, you're basically powered by light, and gets his projectors to attack the Doctor. So we have reels of film kind of coming out and tying up the Doctor. And I was getting kind of flashbacks here to Terror of the Autons, where the Doctor was being attacked by a telephone cable. Anyway, just thought I'd mention that. And Lux is using the Doctor now. He's kind of shining the projector through the Doctor to gain power and increase his size and become properly three-dimensional. There's an interesting thing here. Lux is only supposed to be like 2 feet tall, and yet clearly when he was exiting the... and this is the thing, fans are so annoying, right? So I am now critiquing a Doctor Who episode featuring people like me critiquing Doctor Who. I am well aware of the irony here. Anyway, but when Lux came out of the cinema screen, he was clearly quite big. So why does he end up being only 2 feet tall? Don't know. Anyway, never mind. Belinda manages to persuade Mr. Pye to use matches to set fire to the film, which is said to be highly explosive. And I'm now getting references. I'm now getting kind of like a reference to Inglourious Bastards, the Tarantino film. So if you didn't know me, Quentin Tarantino is probably my favourite director of all time. Kubrick would be a close, Francis Ford Coppola would be a close third, I think. But Quentin Tarantino, I have his entire collection. I've loved it since Reservoir Dogs. And in Inglourious Bastards, spoilers, there's a big scene at the end involving tons of highly flammable film in a cinema. So this is, extremely similar to that. Except all it does here is it blows a hole in the wall, and then apparently the fire stops. Not quite sure why. Blows a hole in the wall, and clearly the explosion goes through the Doctor, but he's fine. Fans are annoying, right? Anyway, Lux has never been outside, in the daylight anyway. He's never been outside, and he's never met daylight. So both of those statements are true. Anyway, he's now given the light of millions of atomic bombs, the light of the sun, and not entirely convinced by this ending. So he basically just doesn't stop growing in size, just becomes infinite. And I'll tell you why I'm not overly convinced by this. But so in the last series, we met Sutek, the Destroyer, who we've met before, who's the god of death, another one of the pantheon of gods. And the god of death is ultimately defeated by death or by life. He dies, and it never really made much sense to me. How can death die? It's like image of the Fendal. The Doctor says the Fendal is death. How do you defeat death itself? Well, Sutek was kind of... Anyway, so Lux is defeated by the thing that he wants, light. You'd think that he's given so much light, he gets so big and just kind of dissolves into nothing. I would have thought the way of defeating Lux would have been the opposite, that you get rid of all light, darkness, shadows. Surely if you give him light, infinite light, he becomes infinitely powerful, which is implied because Belinda says, well, now he's a god. Well, he always was a god. The Doctor says, well, we're 60% water, but we can still drown. Well, yeah, bit hand wavy, I think, that ending. Anyway, and then Mrs. Flood turns up in 1952. So there we go. And then right at the end, as we crash into the credits, I thought it was a bit of an abrupt ending. We hear Lizzie, one of the Doctor's fans, talking about the episode, and it turns out they still exist. The three of them, they've now got their own life, and they're sitting in their lounge watching Doctor Who. And here I am sitting in my lounge talking to you about Doctor Who. I am supremely aware of the irony of this. This was another incredibly bright, colourful episode. I liked Mr. Ringading. I thought some of the interactions with him could have been a bit better. No pun intended. His appearance seemed very flat. What I mean is, in the likes of, the Roger Rabbit cartoon, for example, and if my friend Kevin John Davies is watching this, hopefully he's smiling because he worked on that. But it's kind of like there's a lot more interaction between the cartoon people, who admittedly are more 3D, and the real life characters. Whereas here, so for example, there's a scene in front of the cinema screen where Mr. Ringading is in the centre and the Doctor and Belinda are very far apart looking at him, and they're not close. There's not much interaction. I felt like a lot of room was given for the animation, and they don't really tend to get close to him. There's not. I realise we're on a TV budget, but we've got Disney money here, right? So what I'm saying is, I think more could have been made of the interaction between the two. They could have had them touching, but they don't seem to have that. On the topic of Disney, and I said I'd go into this last week and then I forgot. There's been a lot of talk that allegedly Disney aren't happy with Doctor Who, the ratings from the last series. I think their distribution deal lasts for 2 series, this being the second. There's talk from Russell T Davies that there might be a hiatus after this series. There's talk that Ncuti Gatwa, the Doctor, is possibly moving to America and is looking for new roles, which I think would be a shame. This is the thing with Doctor Who fans, is ever since the hiatus in 1986, we've been terrified that Doctor Who would be cancelled again, and older fans like me, we've never got over that. I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. We've had reduced episodes before, whilst actors have, taken a break or they've been resetting in the background, that kind of thing. I think it would definitely be a shame, but it's not the end of the world. I think this series has started off a lot stronger than the last series, and I liked the last series. But this is the problem, right? This is the problem that's highlighted in this episode, is you have fans like me sitting critiquing Doctor Who, like I am right now, and certain people are very keen to say, #RIP Doctor Who. Everyone's very doom and gloom. They're not happy unless they're unhappy, basically. I do think perhaps Disney are being a bit fickle. It's like, I'll give you a ridiculous example, right? Disney bought Star Wars, and now whenever and Star Wars has some very adult type themes in it. So for example, in Return of the Jedi, we see that Jabba has slave girls. And more specifically, Boba Fett's starship is called Slave One. And yet, every time a toy or a Lego set now is released of the Slave One, which is its name, they have to call it Boba Fett's starship or Jango Fett's starship. They're not allowed to use the word slave. And I have to say, it doesn't matter if you're a multi-billion company spending that amount of money on a franchise, you must know what you are buying, right? So why try and change it to fit your own vision? And I would say the same here of Disney and Doctor Who. They haven't bought it, they don't own it, but they've bought the distribution rights, and then they're allegedly unhappy with Doctor Who. Well, surely you know what you've bought. This is a show that's been going for over 60 years. It fundamentally, you know, there are eras and there are changing lead actors and changing production crews, but fundamentally the show doesn't change. Why suddenly be surprised if it doesn't match your vision? I don't get it. It's like, you know, a girl or a boy goes and gets a partner and tries to change them. Oh, I really, really like her, but I don't like these things that she does. I want her to conform. No, she's her own person and she can do her own things. And Doctor Who is its own thing and shouldn't have to conform to someone else's view just because they're putting money into it. Why change things in Star Wars just because you own it now? If you're not happy with certain aspects of it, don't buy it. Go make your own. Rant over. Look, as I say, fully aware of the irony that I am sitting here in a Doctor Who scarf and a Star Wars t-shirt talking about a show where people like me were sat in Doctor Who scarves and Star Wars t-shirts talking about Doctor Who. Yeah, mind blown. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now. I did like this. I think more could have been done with Mr. Ringading, and I'm not entirely convinced by the ending, but I thought the performances were solid. Some of the American accents, maybe not so much, but there we go. Listen, thank you very much for watching this episode of Total Ramblings. I hope to see you again for either the next episode, Doctor Who review, or I've got a Lego episode coming up. We'll be looking at Andor in the future. So please do all the usual YouTube-y stuff, like, subscribe, click, share, comment, blah, 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 and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.